Hi everybody, my name is Scott Laird and I'm the orchestra director at the North Carolina School of Science and Math. And I've been providing some videos on how I make guide tracks for my orchestra throughout the pandemic, and I'm probably going to continue doing it after the pandemic is over. So today I want to talk a little bit about getting bass lines recorded. Yeah, I've mentioned before that I love to use my NS Design electric violins to do all of the violin, viola, and cello tracks. And today I want to talk just a little bit about the NS Design radius bass that I use for the bass lines. So when I'm creating these guide tracks, I'm really playing all 5 voices of the string orchestra and stacking them together in a digital audio workstation. And I have found after a lot of experimentation that I really like doing the bass line with an electric bass guitar. The reason I do that, there are a number of reasons. First of all, I love being able to get just the right amount of tone control so that I can get the attack and articulation of the notes for the bass line. Now you might be thinking, well, if it's arco, it's not going to sound like the bass. And I get that, but I want to remind you that the guide track is really for reference for students to learn their part and then record their part on their own so that I can put them together in a digital audio workstation. By doing the bass line with a bass guitar, I am getting that articulation. The bass players are really hearing that clear articulation and able to play along with it. The rest of the orchestra is hearing that articulation very cleanly, and to my ear, it promotes really accurate rhythm. So that's an important facet of this. The second important facet is the fact that a bass guitar is fretted. It allows me to create a very accurate intonation under which I'm going to build everything else. Now I can play an upright bass, but in all honesty, it's not my instrument. I'm a violinist. And so when I play a bass guitar, I know by using a fretted instrument, I'm going to have very accurate intonation. I want to tell you, with my electric instruments and for recording these guide tracks, I always tune my instrument with an electronic tuner. I do that with the bass as well. So before I even start the recording session, I make sure that all of my instruments have been tuned with an electronic tuner that I happen to have on my phone. Now I am using an NS Design radius bass. It's the wave radius. I like this bass for a lot of reasons. It has really great attacks or transients, so I love the bite to the sound. It also sustains very nicely, so when I play a note and I'm playing maybe a half note or a whole note and I want that sustain to last, the sustain really lasts nicely on this bass. It has great tone controls. I tend to leave the tone controls open the whole way, so I'm getting the whole frequency spectrum that allows me to hear the attacks really nicely, so that works really well. And it's just a really balanced, well set up, great sounding instrument. So I recommend this. If you don't have a NS Design radius bass for your school orchestra program or your middle school or high school, I strongly recommend this instrument. So today I've been working on a little grade 2.5 piece by Tom Sharp, one of my favorite arrangers and composers. It's called Just for Fun, and it's just got a nice little rhythm to it. It's sort of a little bit Latin and sounds really cool. So a very repetitive bass line, arco and pizzicato, but it just has this kind of nice So I'm going to play a little bit of the arrangement for you that I put together. I always record the bass line first, and then I go up from there. In this particular piece, the cello part very closely mirrors the bass part. So again, I don't think it really bothers my students. They hear the bass line on a bass guitar. They hear the cello part on, as I've talked about in other videos, on an electric violin with D'Addario octave strings, pushing it down the octave. So I also want to say this. I don't ever put reverb on the bass. If you're adding a little bit of reverb for the impression of a room, I think that's great to do with violins, the highest pitched instruments, a little bit less on viola, a little bit less on cello, and I leave the reverb off on the bass, and it really, again, promotes accuracy. So here's a little bit of Just for Fun by Tom Sharp. You'll hear the drum part that I created first, and then it gets into the bass line first along with cello. You'll notice there's very little reverb here. Second violin comes in with a little bit of reverb. Now first. Hoping that it translates on the video and you can hear the real crisp and articulate bass. But for me, articulation and accuracy of intonation, along with great tone quality with this instrument, it just really works well. I hope this helps out for you. Always record the bass first when you're doing guide tracks, no reverb. And by the way, I always pan the bass directly in the center. Good luck. I hope this helps out a little bit.